Welcome back to the channel, everybody. This video is going to be extremely different. I'm going to be discussing a recent trip that I went on, and if you haven't seen the video, I will put it in the link below, the description below. Make sure you go watch that video first, because it's going to set up this whole video, a discussion on what went down in my rescue in the Grand Canyon. And I'm going to be talking to Eric. We're going to be answering a lot of questions that you all had in the comments of both of our videos, and just kind of sharing what we think some of the mistakes were, what we think some of the things we did great were, and just a lot about the trip. So let's get started.
Okay. So we try this again. I really, This third time. Are you alive and recovering? How are you feeling?
I'm actually really good. Yeah, I would say I'm probably 95% of the way right now. Yeah, I get really tired throughout the day, which is kind of weird, like randomly. Yeah. And really weirdly is I'm sleeping, because I've been tracking my sleep for like a year and a half, and I'm sleeping on average an extra hour per night now.
Whoa.
So if you're having a hard time sleeping, get Rhabdo.
Get
rhabdomyolysis.
Oh man. Well, that is, your body is probably doing a ton of catch up to just shed toxins and regrow muscles and all that stuff.
Yep. Yeah. So
it's been what has it been? It's been 2 weeks, I think, since we actually evacuated the Grand Canyon.
Maybe a little longer. Two and a half, something like that.
It was, I think, the
19th or
February 19th that we actually had the rescue. So
yeah, today's the 7th.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's been 2.5 weeks.
That's crazy. It feels like it just happened.
It does. Yeah, for sure. So
yeah.
But I'm excited to answer a lot of the questions from people, because how many comments did you get on your video? I got a lot.
I have over 800 comments that have chimed in. So there's definitely a ton of interest. People have a lot of questions. People have a lot of critiques that they want to offer.
Yeah,
right. Yeah, it'd be cool to just kind of talk through some of what we learned, answer some comments, and go from there.
Yeah. So I think probably the biggest comment that I got was like, first of all, do you work out and are you in shape? It was the biggest comment I got, because I feel like people assume that if you're at that point that it's because you're just out of shape. And from what I learned about Rhabdo, I'm not the biggest exerciser. I will fully admit that. I had been eating extremely healthy, doing my best to prep myself for the hike. I don't just sit around all day. I am active. But people assume that because you're not you're at a point where you're struggling, that it's because you're out of shape. And in that situation, that's just not true. So that's why ultra athletes get this. That's why CrossFit had a huge problem with it, because you're essentially pushing your body to a point where it can't handle what's happening anymore. And what I was told, so I read a lot of comments, and there was a lot of people with a lot of opinions and a lot of experts in the comments. There were so many people that were like, section. Oh, here's what's exactly going down, because I know this, and this is why I know this. I'm just going to go with actually talking to doctors about this, because I talked to 2 doctors, and 2 doctors told me that you're not more susceptible to having it again.
That's good news.
They told me that if you've had it once, that does not mean it's just going to happen again, or you're more likely to have it happen again. And they said it's because of a lack of fluids. They said it's because of diet, and you've pushed your body to the point where it's done creating energy. There's nothing left to give you, and so it's just gonna, kill itself.
It's got to take that from somewhere, and
right.
The muscles are basically it.
Yep,
that's all that's left. Yeah, that's crazy. So one of the things that stands out to me about this experience in so many ways is that I actually had never heard of Rhabdo
Me neither.
ever. And
Nothing.
I know that it's rare. It's not like crazy, crazy rare, but the fact that I've taken 3 Woofer Wilderness First Responder courses, like a main first course and then like 2 subsequent recertifications. I've worked as a guide in a field where we take clients out for long hikes, and they never discussed Rhabdo as like,
Right.
hey, if people are struggling, watch out for this. This is a possible thing that people are going through, which is crazy. Like, so for me, as I was monitoring your health, I knew that you were falling, towards the end of the day at a certain point. I could tell you were struggling, but
Yeah.
I was really only thinking of 2 conditions: altitude sickness and
Yeah.
maybe a heart attack. But
Yep.
mostly I thought altitude sickness.
Me too.
So
I thought if it was a heart attack, because okay, first of all, if you're watching and you haven't watched either of our videos, you should go back and do that before you watch this, because then
Otherwise
this will
this will
all
make
make sense.
a lot. Yeah, exactly.
Second of all, I got a cold after I got back. And I'm
Uh-oh.
getting over that. So you're gonna hear a lot of phlegm in this.
Well, it's all part of the beautiful healing process, Dan.
Yeah, but I thought I was having a heart attack too, but I was like, dude, is it going to hit or what? Like, what's the deal? Why is it taking so long? If it's going to hit, let's just do this now. Like, let's get it over with. But it was just this intermittent pain over several hours. So
Yeah. It was weird because it felt like a heart attack was a possibility, but it really wasn't presenting, other than the chest pain. It really wasn't presenting like a heart attack. So it was kind of a mystery. It was just like, I don't know.
Yeah. Well,
but yeah.
And then, so people were commenting that it's not rare. It's not rare in certain circles. So it's not rare, like, for instance, the Grand Canyon. When I was talking to the ranger, when I went back and watched your like hidden video that you took in the back of the ambulance,
Yeah.
that I didn't even know you were taking, I heard them say, well, we have this and this. These are the most common, and Rhabdo was one of them. Well, that's because it's the Grand Canyon and people are overexerting themselves. But by standards, only 200,000 people within the United States get it annually. And that may sound like a lot. It's not. It's not a lot of people that get it annually. So those people are probably concentrated in like ultra marathons, hiking places, overexerting yourself, CrossFit.
Yeah. And
So.
so I've spoken to a lot of local nurses and doctors too, and they actually see it more frequently with people who are kind of like the opposite end of the spectrum, like where they're either homeless or they're in like drug rehab kind of programs, or maybe they've like fallen in the snow on the street and are kind of like abandoned and on their own for like 24 hours. So it's like not like that's a lot of the cases is actually people who the level of exertion is like just trying to get up off the ground. It's not even like something like the other end, which is CrossFit, super ultra athletes and things like that.
Yeah. So were we ready? Because that was a question that I got a lot. Like, was I ready for this hike? I'm 100% convinced I was ready for this hike. If going back into it, even knowing the conditions again, not knowing what I would have done it again, because I didn't feel unready. I never would have committed to this if I didn't think I wasn't ready. If I don't know, what would you have changed? I kind of, that was another question I feel like people were asking quite a bit.
Yeah, I think that's a great kind of baseline. How could we have been smarter about this, or how could we have kind of avoided the having it come to a rescue situation in the first place? I think we made so. I also think it's important to say that I've actually done this exact itinerary before in February with snow on the North Rim, snow on the North Rim wasn't a surprise. That we knew that we'd talked to the Rangers. For those who are concerned about the North Rim is closed, which only means the North Rim is closed to visitors driving in.
Exactly.
You can still get there if you hike there from the South Rim, which is our plan. The Rangers knew we were coming. They weren't telling us not to go. They were just wanting us to be aware that, hey, there's a lot of snow. It's going to be hard.
Right.
So when they were insistent on the aggressive itinerary part of it, they just were making sure that we were informed.
Yep.
Which is their job. They want people to not be in over their heads. So I think there were a couple of things that I wish could have been a little bit different. So when you flew to Arizona, your flight got delayed.
Right.
And there was a whole snowstorm event that meant that you couldn't arrive with more buffer time in Arizona.
It was in Chicago. It was in Chicago.
It was the Chicago.
Right.
Yeah.
Not Arizona.
The problem was in Chicago.
Right.
With getting out of Chicago.
Yep.
So you arrived. It would have been great to have given you more time at elevation to just have your body
acclimate,
breathing thinner air. And
acclimate. People don't know I live at 500 feet. That's where I live.
Yeah. So So while you were training, you're eating well. I think that the elevation is certainly that played a role. In my mind, it definitely played a role because you can be hiking long distances, you can be training, you can be working out, you can be eating right, and then you just go up 6,000 feet or whatever, and your body just needs some time. And because your flight was delayed out of Chicago, your body had less time, and it was still just well, do we cancel it because of that? I never was really no, we're going to cancel the trip because Dan's flight got delayed some. But that would have helped. You having more time would have helped.
Yep.
What people also, we went through the permitting system that the national park has. The backcountry office knew we were coming, and the way that it works is there's only so many places that you can camp and stay when you're backpacking in the Grand Canyon. It's a canyon. It's not just vast wilderness area where you can go anywhere you want. So there was really Phantom Ranch as one option. Then there's Cottonwood, and then there's the North Rim. And Phantom Ranch has the vast majority of users want to go to Phantom Ranch. So it is very competitive to get a permit for Phantom Ranch. And we did get a permit for Phantom Ranch on the back end of the trip, but getting one wasn't available for that first night. So we would have had to extend our trip by an extra day, and it literally was either this itinerary or nothing. And I've done this itinerary before, actually,
and people were actually
quasi twice.
People were also need to know too that we weren't just dealing with a camping itinerary; we were dealing with commercial filming permits as well. So every day that we extended was just, it was a mess. It was a wreck altogether. Just getting to the permits, and then every day you're out there, you're paying, I don't know, a lot more money to be out there and film. Because you have to have a commercial filming now to be in a national park.
Yeah. Well, yeah. So that is a really good point. We're all working on making videos, and part of what we were doing was filming an episode of Epic Trails, which is the show that I host. And so we were, in case anybody's curious, we were not just roguing the system. We were going through the protocols. We'd gotten film permits. We'd gotten our backcountry permits. And like you mentioned, every day costs a bunch of money. So I thought 5 days was suitable. It was going to be 2 days.
We extended it. Didn't we extend it? I was like, let's go 4. And then you're like, well, that's a little aggressive.
Yeah, you wanted to go across and then straight back without.
Yeah.
No. Rest day. We're going to have a rest day.
I didn't even want a rest day. I'm like, bro, I got this.
Yeah. So we had built in a rest day. The rest day was the day you got evacuated. That
Yeah,
was
yeah.
so.
I was resting in the back of an ambulance
Yeah.
with lots of drugs, lots of drugs.
So the day that I was honestly the most worried about, and I told Dan this on the trail, was day one, getting from the South Rim to Cottonwood.
Yeah.
It's a big day. And it's deceptive. The rigors of the Grand Canyon are really deceptive. You go down a vertical mile in 7 miles, and after you were feeling good when we got to Phantom
Oh
Ranch, it's
yeah.
like, yeah, you're fine. And it's not until you add 3 or 4 more miles on top of
Yep.
that you're like, whoa, my body is hurting.
Well, I
And
mean, that 7 miles, that next 7 miles, that was a steady uphill. I don't know what
yeah,
the elevation gain out of that was. Do you know? Do you remember?
I don't
Like,
know
like
specifically, but it's
maybe
around like
1,500
800.
feet,
I don't even know if it's over 1,000.
1,000.
It's probably 1,200, I think. So,
Okay, so
but
over
it's
7 miles, that's not a huge amount. And so in my mind, I'm like, what's the big deal? We just went
yeah,
down. Like, we're getting momentum going
yeah,
down. Like, we're fine. So
yeah,
for me, I didn't understand because I had never gone down like that before. I've
yeah.
hiked a lot of downhill, but not like that. So I didn't understand what it was doing to me. And I guess
And
it's a different
and
muscle set that it's working.
and most people don't understand the fatigue that kind of downhill puts on your body, because when you are carrying weight, and the Grand Canyon, it's like 10,000 stair steps. So you are going down, and most of the stair steps are actually made for mules, not hikers. So the drops are
Yeah, right.
bigger.
Yeah.
Um, the drops are bigger. So that's one of the reasons why trekking poles are so like absolutely necessary in the Grand Canyon, is
Yep.
because it reduces the impact of dropping. You're using a lot of stabilizer muscles. You're actually like trying to stop your body with every downward step from,
Yeah.
just putting a massive impact on your feet. You're kind of lowering
Yep.
yourself down. And doing that over 7 miles and a mile of vertical down is taxing. And we were all feeling good, but that taxing doesn't show up until miles later, which we obviously felt. But even that was like, I've done that before. And with the last 2 miles to Cottonwood, every time I've done that, that was my third time doing that. I've been worked. So it wasn't alarming. It's just what you sign up for when you go in and do a trip like this.
It was surprising to me how worked I was, because I've done
Yeah.
big days. I've done longer miles, but
Yeah.
it is deceptive what the downhill did. I mean, even Emmett, who's 20 years younger than me,
Yeah.
when he got to the bottom, he was kind of hurting, and I was like, huh, oh, the young guy's hurting, huh? I'm feeling great, Oh, that's too bad. But he was hurting,
Yeah.
and I think part of it is that he didn't use trekking poles on the way down, and then we finally got him to use the trekking pole. Remember, we were like, hey, you really need to pull out your trekking pole.
Yeah. It was about 5 miles in, and we could see like, okay, Emmett's feeling this probably more than anybody else at this point.
Yeah.
And it's because he was the only one who wasn't using a trekking pole. And he was
Yep.
just going off of raw, youthful muscle power. And that was probably unwise. And then once he started using it, he was like, I'm converted. I love trekking
Yes,
poles.
yes.
So, which that was cool to see, because there's some places where you just have to use trekking poles.
Yeah.
And the Grand Canyon was definitely one of them.
And I think if I would have done anything differently on this hike, I think, hindsight is 2020. And for those
Yeah.
people that were commenting, because overwhelmingly positive comments. My video
for
is
sure.
like at a 99% like to dislike rate, which is high for me. There were beyond gracious, wonderful people, but there was the select few that came on and weren't super positive, and where they wanted to tell me the mistakes I made when looking back on something. Hindsight is 2020, and now that if I can look back and go, okay, now I'm able to nitpick and say, yes, here's what I would have done differently. Here's what I've done differently. Here's what I've done differently. I would have done this. I wouldn't have done this. Because in the moment, you can't do that. You're not doing that. You're just It's another backpacking trip. It's just we're out, you don't know. I didn't know I was going to get rescued. Like, why would I overassess the situation in that moment? So I think looking back on it, though, I probably would have taken an extra night at Cottonwood to recoup. I would have forced myself to drink more water because it was cold. And when you're cold, at least for me, I naturally drink less water because I'm not sweating. And I have to force myself to drink water. I don't like drinking water anyway. I'm not like a water guy. I like drinking flavored things. It's just, water's just not my thing. And so it's really, like even when I'm out there, it's tough for me to like, oh man, here we go. I got to drink water.
Yeah, I think the other thing that contributed to the situation was you, as you got further into fatigue, like regular fatigue, you drank less and you ate less because I think you just weren't feeling good. And that is something that you almost have to force yourself to do, is you are fighting the bonk. You're fighting off like just dropping off of a cliff with your energy and your nutrition. And like, because we had discussions about like, hey Dan, can you drink more water? This was something. There's a lot of details that aren't in the video, just so you know.
Exactly.
That got edited out because we didn't want this to be a 2-day video.
Right.
So you started drinking less water. I started knowing that you were drinking less water, and I was encouraging you, but you were just like, I'm going to throw up if I drink water, if I try to force down another trail bar. And I get that, but and I think that's
nauseous.
Where feeling nauseous, and that would have been a good time to be like, you just gotta, even if it's just a bite, you gotta just get something in your body, because I think that was where your body started being like, hey, I need energy from something, and so it started attacking your muscles.
Right. Yeah. I felt like every bite I was going to take, I was going to throw up. I didn't understand why my chest was hurting. And I was afraid that if I was going to eat anything, I was going to bring up what should be in me. Like all the water I drank. And I'm like, I don't want to be more dehydrated. Like throwing up, that's not good. I don't want to do that. And then the other thing I feel like people were asking too in the comments was like, why didn't you just stop on trail? Like if you thought you were going to die, Dan, like what was the point of going on? Why didn't you just stop where you right there on trail? And I thought in my mind, and I think we all did, that the best escape route would be to get me to the top. And it wasn't as though I don't think I was at a point where otherwise I wouldn't have gone to sleep. You guys wouldn't have left me in my tent.
Yeah.
In my fear, in my trauma of experiencing the moment, my brain was probably thinking this could be it. But I didn't ever think like at this second, I'm dying right now. Let's stop. It just pushing through the pain. Hindsight is 20/20 though. I had a ranger comment on one of the videos, a former ranger, I think, search and rescue, and he said, I would have rather had you camp there because too many people pushed themselves to death. And I thought that was interesting. But of course, watching the video, and hindsight is 20/20, I don't think I was at that point there. I feel like it got progressively worse as the night went on. Yeah. It didn't get better. Like I got worse in my tent overnight. That's where the pain was at a 10 out of 10. And it wasn't until, and people don't know this, but I totally barfed my brains out in the morning. That's where a lot of the pain finally, that's where a lot of relief came. I was just like, okay, I can talk now. I can communicate with people. I'm not in as much pain anymore.
So that was the biggest debate for me, was continue on or stop on trail. And actually, in hindsight, I think one of the best decisions that we did make was to keep going to the trailhead.
Yeah.
I am really thankful that we were at the trailhead, and that's for multiple reasons. So when you're thinking about turning around, the difference between being in a canyon versus being on a mountain are the opposite. So on a mountain, you're going up and you're always getting further and further from help, and a rescue becomes more difficult. When you turn around, you get back closer to help. In a canyon, when the one end is essentially closed,
Yeah.
we were going back into turning around would have been going back into further danger. And then why didn't we stop? Well, we had no communication other than an SOS call. And
Yeah.
at the North Rim, I knew we'd have cell phone signal. So that was one. But two, and as it was proved to be the case, your body continued to decline in health overnight. So by moving when you were stronger, that was better because you could move on your own.
Right.
If we had been rescuing you in the morning, had we stopped a mile and a half short of the trail, we would have been either dropping a basket from a helicopter, or we would have been carrying you, your body out. Hopefully, obviously, you're still alive, but we would be carrying you.
That'd be good.
Yeah. So, but you were able to get out under your own power, which is amazing. It made everything 10 times easier the next day because, as people noted, like we were at the trailhead, which is where a road is. So we could be, when stuff hit the fan, we were right at an exit point, like literally where rangers could drive to. And I also knew that there would be some rangers at the North Rim. It wasn't like when it's closed, it just means it's closed to general visitation. There's still a team of people that work there, that do things, that maintain buildings, that look over, and are there for rescues, like people being on the North Rim versus having to come from 20 miles away on the South Rim.
So I think people, maybe just to draw them that picture a little bit, the trailhead, if you're unfamiliar with how that all works, it's just an area where you start the trail, and there's a parking lot there, and there's a road that's there, and those rangers, they plow just an area. They're there. They live there for the winter, so they're plowing just an area for them to be mobile, and that was already plowed. We were camping on the trailhead, but the trailhead itself had not been plowed, so we were on probably maybe 9-10 feet of snow. It may not look like it in the video, but that's because by morning it had frozen and packed down, so we were able to walk on it. But when we got to camp, we had to snowshoe to pad our, or you guys snowshoed and padded up. People probably don't know this, but they set up my tent for me. Like, all of my stuff was set up by these guys. I was incapable. I remember bits and pieces. I remember getting up to the trailhead, and you had set up. I just remember you putting a backpack, and you're like lay on the backpack, and I just remember just barely being able to lay on a backpack. And thankfully, you guys had set up my stuff for me. I crawled in there, and so that's why rescue was so easily able to grab us out of there that morning.
Yeah.
Because we were smart enough, I do believe it's the right choice, that we did hike on to those past couple miles to get to the trailhead to get us out. Hindsight, I still would have done that again, knowing what I know now for sure.
I think that was the right call. I actually don't second guess that. I am confident that if we were on the trail below the rim, the rescue would have been infinitely more difficult, and communication would have been infinitely more difficult.
Yeah.
So I am not people ask, like, why didn't we turn around when we hit the ice fall and the landslide, and those were viable turnaround points, and we had been kind of having a discussion leading up to it that maybe we will turn around at certain points. But we got there, we got to the ice fall, and it was really just a time. It wasn't that it was impossible.
It was time, right? It was probably more dramatic in the video too. Like, people that watched it probably thought, "Oh my gosh, there's an avalanche that just happened on trail." Like, that you should never. It was a big ice fall, but it wasn't. It wasn't an end to your hike. Like, there's always going to be obstacles.
That ice feature has been there every year. Sometimes it's bigger. It was the biggest I'd ever seen it, but I've always done what we did, which was just you hike in that gully around it. except for I did squeeze behind it, which
he got through there. I'm like, yeah, rest of us ain't getting through there.
no, Dad was just gonna waste another hour. So we you know.
We made the right choice there. So then another couple of questions that I think people were at least asking, why didn't they helicopter us out? Was a question that I got quite a bit.
Yeah.
And I mean, I'm happy to answer that question. Otherwise,
I mean, that was really your call. That
was my call.
You were conscious. You could make that call. So why didn't you go for that?
So I guess this goes into another question that I got asked quite a bit was, why didn't you push your SOS button and don't you have rescue insurance? I didn't push the SOS button because I thought that I was going to be okay by morning. Even though I was going through pain, I was just fighting the urge. So there was a lot of pride involved in that. Fully will admit that. But then also at the top, we were so close to Rangers. When they came in, I didn't know you had a cell signal until you called 911.
Yeah.
And then I remember going, oh, I do have rescue insurance. And the Rangers came over there, and I remember asking them, like, hey, can we, like, recall this in? Because I'm pretty sure with my rescue insurance, I have to call out on my Garmin for it to work because it's through Garmin. Yeah. And the helicopter, I was told, was going to cost around $40,000 to fly me to Flagstaff. And I'm like, if I get to Flagstaff and find out all I've got is a tummy ache, and they had to helicopter me out, that's not happening. And I knew by this point, they had given me, IV. I was feeling better. They're flooding my system. They've got me on morphine and whatever else they put me on. And I knew that I wasn't going to crash right there. I wasn't going to die right there. I was probably going to make it through the day. The alternative was, hey, we'll open up the North Rim for you. We can do it, but it's going to take several hours and several miles of road plowing to get you out. I'm like, oh, yeah, option B. I'd much rather have the taxpayers pay for my escape route than my family drop $40,000 on a helicopter. So if you're living in Arizona and Utah, thank you.
Oh man, I just got my tax bill. It's like 4 pennies higher than normal. But actually, that's a really good point. So I got a lot of comments from people who live in like New Zealand, Australia, other countries, and that would just be a service that basically the federal government would provide. If people need rescue, it's not a cost to an individual person, which is hugely expensive, 40 to 50,000. I've heard it's even 50,000.
Yeah.
That is a like potentially life-altering sum of money to owe for at least I don't know how many times you've won the lottery, but that's a lot of money. So if you can avoid it, and the Rangers were mostly, they weren't concerned about having to plow for their own, it's kind of a pain, it's kind of annoying to plow. They're maintaining that road no matter what. Whatever choices, they were actually going to be sending the driver to plow that road that day, which is
really? I didn't know that.
You might not be aware of that conversation. That was actually part of what allowed this all to happen. So you hear the 911 person say on the video, the only way out is through an air ambulance. That's because that was normally the case. But we were kind of able to figure it out because these rescues actually took 4 or 5 hours of time. It's hard to really understand how long oftentimes a backcountry rescue really takes. It's very rarely is it like you hit SOS and 15 seconds later a helicopter is descending upon you. So we were able to figure it out, and they were concerned that it was going to take 6 or 8 hours to plow that road, which was a concern because you are a patient having to sit there in pain for 6 to 8 hours, not because, that's not how they want to spend their day. They were already going to be maintaining the road Now, this year is unique because they're normally they don't maintain that road at all, and it's only snowmobiles in and out from Jacob Lake. However, this year, for some reason that we're not privy to, they had decided to maintain it as a single lane road so that the rangers in certain facilities for concessions and Aeromark and the people that run the lodges and things like that can get in and out for. Okay, question. How did you have any comments that are just like, you're completely wrong? This absolutely like not even. You're
Oh
just
my
way
gosh.
out.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. There was. I don't want to bring like people the glory that they're. I don't like to feed trolls, but yeah, for sure. Like just the one person said something along the lines of like, "Do you realize the trouble that you've caused everybody?" I'm just like, oh man.
Yeah.
Do you realize the trouble that you've caused everybody? I kind of think the polar opposite, honestly, because we recorded this whole thing. Yeah. I think it's brought awareness to a huge issue that I think that a lot more people have this condition and just don't know it, and maybe haven't reached a point where it's hurting them. So yeah, there was. How about you?
Yeah. So when I'm assessing risk, just as a general topic, something that's worth considering is not just the physical safety of our group, which is obviously super important, but I don't want to put, say like search and rescue, I don't want to put them in a situation where somebody else not associated with our party has to risk their life for a rescue. And I don't really think that in any part of our rescue is anybody's, like, search and rescue is not risking their life to come in and do that.
Right.
So I think like somebody, there's a couple of comments about like how we didn't think of the Rangers and their burden. And honestly, like, to me, that element, it's worth considering, like, you know, are we going to do something where anybody trying to perform a rescue is going to maybe be injured or hurt performing the rescue? That wasn't really the case. And like, the Rangers are there to help hikers and to perform many tasks, and one of them is to do this job. So this was
probably the easiest rescue they've ever had.
I think it was an interesting rescue, and it was easy. Like, we made it. They didn't have to haul they do not like hauling bodies out of the Grand Canyon.
Exactly. Yeah.
As you can imagine. Nobody wants to do that. And they did not have to do this. They literally could drive up and then drive you out. So it was not, So to like the burden that we put on the National Park Service was actually negligible. Like, they were already staffed. They're already maintaining that road. They're already doing all of these things. And so we just kind of gave them something to do that day.
I think that's probably 100% true. Yeah, this was in their mind, I think that this was I would love to actually contact them and just ask them some of these questions, because it would be interesting. I would be willing to bet that they were like, yes, that was a textbook. That's how it should have gone down. I'm glad it went down that way. Obviously, anytime somebody survives and recovers, that's how it's supposed to go down. But like, everything was done correctly, accurately. They were next level. They were great.
They were wonderful. Yeah.
So.
I did have one other comment that I think somebody put, which is completely subjective opinion, but they said anytime that you have to, like, call for a rescue, that's a failed trip.
Really?
So like, which to me, this was not a failure.
That is, oh my gosh,
of a trip.
Could you imagine if that gets put into people's heads? Like, even saying that out loud is, for that person to say that, is so arrogant and stupid. Because if you're watching, you're stupid. You're stupid. And I'm sorry, but you are. Because for some people to feel that a rescue is an end, that's a failed trip, that just causes people to not want to call for rescue because they're going to look at like they've failed. And if anything, my family, that makes me angry. My family would consider failure not calling for rescue.
Yeah.
If I had died, if somebody had died out there, how arrogant. Okay. Whew.
Yeah, exactly. If you had died, I would not call the trip a success.
Right.
I think that's safe to say. But the fact that it came to a point where we said, you know what, we need help, and we got help, and we were able to learn something, and we're able to basically all return to pre-trip health.
Yeah.
That is a success. I absolutely think that the trip was a success, even though things didn't go how we wanted them to, envisioned them to. Nobody wanted you to have a serious, very painful, very scary experience.
Yeah.
But it was still, at the end of the day, you're alive, you're healthy again, and we'll get to go on more backpacking trips. That to me is definitely a success. So I don't know if they were saying I don't know if they were
maybe
truly
I jumped the
saying
gun a little.
that. No. I don't know if they were saying that the fact that you called means like called for help. That's where the error was. The failure being in all of the lead up, that like you didn't do your risk assessment properly, that you got in over your head. Therefore, we, like if I were to go to Everest tomorrow and try to climb it, and I got a pulmonary edema or something like that, that'd be that would be like, I didn't think through the steps properly, so therefore that's the failure. Not that we called for help. That wasn't the failure point.
Right.
But it is like, I don't want to stigmatize calling for help. Like that we did. I think that I agree. I think that for many ways along the line, what the steps that we took for the rescue were textbook. We got to a place of to facilitate a rescue as easily as possible. We got you. We didn't know what the condition was you were suffering from. I'm glad we didn't turn around, and I'm glad we didn't go lower, because it wasn't actually altitude sickness. Even if it was altitude sickness, I don't know if.
Yeah, it wasn't as bad. Yeah. If that would have made a bunch of a difference.
Yeah. So, I don't know. That was a standout. It was an interesting comment because I just definitely had, like maybe his like first aid instructor, they talked about taking a wilderness course, and that if you have to call for rescue, then that's a failed trip. Not because you called for help, but because of other things along the line. But
it's so funny.
That's just not my opinion.
I think I want to lean into a little bit in the conversation of the fact that we were filming, the fact that I do film for a living.
Yeah.
There's a lot to unpack there. The fact that anytime you're filming something, not only we were filming your YouTube video that was going to be seen by 100,000 people, mine that's going to be seen by 100,000 people, but then also a television show on top of it. Yeah, the thought crossed through my mind. I definitely don't want to push the rescue button, because that's the last thing I want to be seen as the guy that pushes the rescue button.
Yeah.
So there was definitely an element of pride. I didn't want to hand off my backpack. I didn't want to be like, hey, let's get the Rangers here. There was the thought actually crossed through my mind, man, maybe I should get helicoptered out of here, because that'll at least make people feel like I got a real, because I didn't know what was going on. I didn't know what it was. Because I thought maybe it is a tummy ache.
Yeah.
So and when you're filming all this, and then the other question that I feel like people were asking was, because I got this in my comments too, which was like, oh, you must have really been hurting. You were able to pull your phone out in the middle of the night and film yourself in your tent. Oh, you must have been really hurting because, or you didn't look too bad when you were hobbling off to the, it's so funny to scrutinize frame by frame when somebody posts something of their traumatic experience on the web. Like you when we're editing something, we think, okay, there's no any way, we've done everything we can to show and do everything possible to make sure that people understand what happened. We post it. There's no way anybody's going to troll this, and sure enough, there's trolls. But then what people don't realize is that at 4 o'clock in the morning, when I pulled out my phone and filmed myself at that moment, I wasn't thinking, oh, this will get views. I was thinking, like, my family's going to want to know what happened. Like, this is the stitch of effort that I've got left to be able to film anything was happening, so that I even have recollection of what was going on. It wasn't like, all right, let me get my makeup on now, and it was like, that's what was going through my mind in those situations. And it's just,
yeah.
Yeah.
We definitely weren't doing this to be like, let's get one kick-ass video. Like, it wasn't about the, like, putting ourselves into a situation, then calling rescue, all for drama, all for, like, the fact that we were filming. I'm really glad that we filmed. Like, we had 3 people there, 2 of whom are camera people. So myself and you, and then 2 more camera guys. And there's really only so many people that can be, like, in the tent attending to you or things like that.
Right.
Like, having all 4 of us in your 1-person tent doesn't help.
Right.
And actually, like, the best thing was I was the person that had first responder training. I should have, that's where I should have been. And Jake and Emmett, they brought a lot of skills to the table that were very helpful, but they shouldn't have been, just in your face. I don't know. I don't even know there's nothing that they would do. And so it was like, get the cameras, like, film this. And because it's also really not just for the sake of entertainment, but I'm glad that I have it so that I can look back and be like, okay, I'm really glad that I handled things this way, almost for the ability to have a non-biased, like, there's just video evidence of what happened. And it's not, because both of our memories, for various reasons on various things, are, like, probably not 100% accurate.
Right.
But we can now look back at the video and be like, oh, that's what the ranger said, or that's what the dispatcher said, or, stuff like that. That's really helpful. So I'm really glad we were filming.
Oh, for sure. So, would you ever do this again?
Yes. I mean, I would. It would be lovely to do it again with a slower pace. I think that would be helpful. The fact, that the amount of snow wasn't surprising. We knew that there was going to be a lot. That's why we brought snowshoes. I would do it again. I would do it again in the winter as well. So what's unclear is I've done this trip before several years ago. And one of the reasons why I wanted to do it again in the winter is because it's a really, really unique time to be in the Grand Canyon. It is so beautiful, so special, and it's challenging, which means there's very, very, very few people on the North Rim. And to be at one of the most visited places on Earth when there's no one around is something that I treasured. And I was so wanting to share that with you.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I wish I could have saw it.
I know you never got to really
I got videos,
see the
though.
view.
I saw the videos.
Yeah.
I think that if I were to be presented with this exact same itinerary again, I would prefer no snow. I think snowshoeing was definitely difficult. I mean, it's not fun. It wasn't fun. No. I would have done it again. I would probably try it again, though. But I would have an extra day to recoup at Cottonwood. That's where I probably would have taken my rest day. And I would be more attuned to eating and drinking. I was not. I just wasn't. And it wasn't because I was not trying to not eat and drink, but I had no appetite, you know?
Yeah.
So
I think having one more day of flexibility, like you said, like a day, another day, go to Cottonwood, still do that like 14-mile day, but then have a rest day, and then go to the North Rim, and ideally have another rest day up at the North Rim, even because then you can just enjoy. It's
sure.
so beautiful up there. And then the other question I got is how did how did Jake and Emmett and Eric get back? Well, we hiked.
I paid for the helicopter for him.
Yeah,
That was what the 40
yeah,
grand was for.
yeah. No, and it was hard, and we were all hurting, and I got lots of blisters, but it was it was what we expected. It was there weren't additional complications or things like that. So,
Dude, some dude
we did hike back.
I will point this guy out because he was a total moron too in the comments. But some dude commented. He's like, you guys were obviously unprepared and didn't know what you were doing, and I could tell by the heavy backpack that you were carrying, Dan, and all the heavy gear that you had that you were unprepared for this trip. My backpack with food and water was like, what was it, like 34 pounds all in with winter gear?
I could not believe how light your backpack was. Mine was 52 pounds.
Yeah.
Mine was a
yeah.
full 18 pounds more than your pack.
Yep. Mine was
If
light
anything,
by far.
I was the jackass with the overly absurd pack. Yeah, I was regretting the 52-pound pack, but also at the same time, like part of it was having first aid stuff, part of it was having camera equipment. I was carrying like a few extra things that you probably weren't. I was carrying a lot of fuel.
You dude.
I carried like 2.5 pounds of camp fuel because we were going to be melting snow.
We could have melted all of this. We probably should have. We could have melted all of the snow in the Grand Canyon. And
we could have reduced the snowpack. I could have just been out there melting snow.
With the amount of fuel that Eric carried.
One of the things, I did not want to be responsible for us having no ability to drink water. Because I was like going to skimp on a fuel canister.
Yeah, I think
we had enough fuel.
We were good. We did.
We were good.
You probably still have enough fuel to do it again.
Yeah. And so there is one other thing that I think that at least is important for me, I would like to talk about, is just the idea that this type of thing, I won't say that it's inevitable, but when you spend a lot of time outside doing trips in the mountains, in canyons, something at some point will go wrong, and that doesn't mean that you are inept. It doesn't mean that you are ill-prepared. It sometimes just stuff happens. A fully competent person breaks a leg, or a rock falls down and hits somebody and causes an injury, or an avalanche happens, or there's all sorts of things that can happen in the outdoors, or an unexpected weather event can come in. And those are risks that anybody who chooses, like myself, I make my profession. My profession is to be like an outdoor wilderness kind of professional. So I understand that there are risks. And I've had another near-death experience where I almost died in a flash flood. That was about almost 10 years ago now. It was 9 years ago. And I don't think that it makes me a moron, or to make it, something that I was, just pushing the limits. I do think, I've said this before to you, I do think of any of the mistakes that really tend to happen for people who have as much experience as I do, or you do, or a lot of like outdoorsy people do, it generally comes from overconfidence. And I think that if anything, that was again, the biggest mistake I had was that I always assume that we're going to just be able to be fine, that we'll be able to figure it out, that we'll be able to navigate it, which ultimately we did. Yeah. But my overconfidence was just, it's an aggressive itinerary, but we'll be tired, we'll be fatigued, but we'll make it. Um, I didn't know about Rhabdo, so you don't know what you don't know. I didn't know that this was a condition. I didn't know that we could potentially push ourselves into a really risky situation. I mean, I guess at some level you think like, yeah, obviously you can just push it so far that
Yeah.
it might kill somebody. But I wasn't thinking in my mind the risks were elevation or altitude sickness or like a rock fall or something like that. And barring one of those types of things, we keep going and we'd be fine. We'd be fatigued. We'd, be at the
Yeah.
max where we're just like, wow, this is hard, but we'd be fine.
Yeah.
And this, I'm glad that we had this experience because I didn't know that this was possible,
Yeah.
basically.
Yeah.
Or I didn't know that rhabdo was a condition that was a realistic thing for people who just are pushing themselves like we were. For anybody out there who's like, I highly recommend people who are spending a significant amount of time in the wilderness or really interested in doing a lot of backpacking. Wilderness first aid, wilderness first responder courses are amazing. They provide so much training so that this isn't a completely overwhelming experience. But even if you don't have that kind of training, one of the best things that you can do is just remain level-headed, not be overwhelmed. An
Yeah.
example of
For
a
sure.
bad thing to do would be for the team to be like, "Oh my God, Dan, are you okay? Tell me what you need. Tell me what you need."
Yeah.
Like amping up and then getting like making so that
Yeah.
you have to be the decision maker
Yeah.
or like don't do that. Remain calm, keep people breathing, keep people like calm and relaxed, even if that's all you know how to do. That's really, really powerful. Um,
I was honestly, I know it's going to sound so backwards. It was so, I know it's going to sound bad, but you probably know me well enough by now that I was at many times I was more concerned about putting you guys out and ruining your trip and being like,
yeah.
oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, you guys. I did not like. I'm so sorry. Like I felt like I was, and yeah,
The amount of times you apologized was pretty absurd. Oh, I just came across one comment that I actually do kind of want to address. So let let's see. This person believes that the group was negligent. In that, like, why were we separated? Why were you being left behind? And making
they've
this
obviously never hiked with more than one person in their life.
well, there's a certain number of assumptions that came into this. So we were juggling multiple factors at once. We were breaking trail. We were setting the track in a place where certain areas were actually very difficult to determine if we were on trail or not. Sometimes the trail kind of disappeared. As daylight was fading, I initially put an importance on myself and Jake setting the trail, breaking the trail so that you and Emmett would have a clear path to follow where you didn't have to be like, where's the trail? So
Yeah,
I didn't want to be making navigational decisions in the dark where I didn't want to compound the problems that we were having with, okay, well now we somehow got off trail and I don't know where the heck the rest of the trail is because it's buried under 9 feet
yeah,
of snow. Well, I think that people, they maybe even if they like read books or watch other videos, they think that they become an expert in all situations. And, most, I'm guessing that most of the people that are commenting negative things have never actually been really out there. Maybe I'm wrong, but there's a lot of
no, I think
assumptions
you're. I think
that
you're right.
happen.
I think you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah, but yeah. Well, I mean, I it was funny. Even being in the hospital, when I was in the hospital, I thought to myself, I was trying to plan when I could do this hike again.
Yeah.
Like I wanted to do it, and it was so. I was talking to Eric. So before we started the podcast, we were talking a little bit, and I was telling Eric how even looking back on some of the video that we filmed, I don't remember some of that stuff. Even when I was totally conscious of it, I think my body just blocked things out from that trip. But seeing it, it was just like, oh man, that was awesome. Let's do that again. But let's just maybe a little bit less of an extreme situation, but for sure, I'm looking at the calendar, like let's go.
Honestly, I couldn't believe that you texted me 2 days later. When are we going back to the Grand Canyon? I love that. And I would do it again. And I think those kind of the nutrition, the altitude, certain things, I think really the amount of snow, some of that kind of pushed us beyond where if we had had a day of rest, or if we had maybe done a little bit better job with your nutrition that second day, then I don't think we would have had the issues like we did. But I'd do it again. I mean, it was crazy, but honestly, there's so much of me that's I kind of loved it. As weird as much as that might not make sense to people.
Well, no, because you asked me too. You're like, would you have had a good? Did you ask me? You're like, would you have had a good experience if you could go back and change it, or maybe there's a commenter, but if you could go back and change it to how you wanted it to go down or how it went down, what would you rather have? And I think I would want it to go down exactly how it went. Not because it was cool to suffer and be in a hospital and almost die. I think it was such a learning experience. I feel that much more elevated in my own personal experience. I feel like it's going to sound terrible, but it's almost like you're able to now talk about something that other people can't talk about in a way. Like your experience gives you a little bit of street cred, right? Not that I'm looking for street cred, but it offers that. And then what it can teach other people now, because thousands of people are going to watch this, and for them now to be more aware of their own bodies, their own situations, their own hikes, their own planning, and maybe catch it when somebody else is going through it, that's going to make some differences. So yeah, I think I would have kept it.
Yeah, I mean, in ways, I'm glad too. Obviously, there's so much to learn. I think that when you go through something like this, it inevitably creates a shift, I think, in you as a person or me as a person. Going through this, I now know how I did react under stress, under pressure.
Yeah, for sure.
And that is reassuring that I feel okay, when stuff hits the fan, I can keep it together. I can be in all of these situations are complicated. There's nuance. There's 20 different decisions we could have made along the way. Each would have resulted in slightly different variations. And I believe that we made actually really good decisions along the way. I think that there was stuff that we could have done differently. There's learning points, but I feel proud of us in a lot of ways. I'm glad that other people will be aware of Rhabdo and what to look out for, how to be safer. I at this point, 250,000 people have watched our videos in 2 weeks or 1 week. It's not even been out. So it's pretty amazing, the level of recognition that this can bring to backcountry safety. A lot of times we talk about Garmin's or Zolios or things that it's kind of disconnected from real world scenarios. And now we can kind of have a real talk about backcountry safety that's rooted in real experiences. That's just so different than just boop, hit the SOS button. You've always got that in your back pocket, which is true, and it's nice to have, but it's still it provides a reality and grounding on the discussions of how to determine what's too much, how to determine if you're going to be dangerous.
I mean, we had the button and didn't push it. We had the button and didn't push it, right? Or, it was like, so it's.
Well, we would have.
We would have had we not had
reception.
cell servers, for sure.
But we had cell phone reception. So that, changed. It allowed us to have. I'm really thankful that we had cell phone signal because, we can actually communicate specifically in real time with rescue, with dispatchers.
Yeah, for sure.
It just makes it infinitely easier than just
Yeah.
a blind SOS, and then people are just responding to a ping essentially.
Yeah.
Without any backstory.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like we could keep on talking about stuff, but again, I think hindsight is 2020. Looking back on it, it's easy to scrutinize and look at everything you did. And sometimes I wish everybody's adventures and all their mistakes were also put on YouTube. So you and I could both go and scrutinize those as well, and see how much different those would be as well. But we're just the ones that chose this life, and we put ourselves out there. So yeah,
that's
there
true.
It is. Yeah. But for sure, I'm glad that it went down the way it did. I'm glad that you guys were there. I'm glad that everybody's healthy, and I cannot wait to do it again.
Dan, I'm glad to hear that. I'm glad that wasn't the end of our relationship. I really have, just become good friends with you and bonded. And I think that's fun to see in the video too, is like the level of trust and friendship that we've genuinely developed over the last year, 2 years of backpacking together. So let's figure out another time to go do something fun.
Let's do it. Awesome. Thanks, my friend. Let's do it soon.
Right on, Dan. Well, this was cool to have a conversation. I'm glad it worked out.
Peace.
Later, Dan.